Hey everybody, TJ here. It has been a really eventful week and I think we've earned ourselves a little bit of me time. So I thank you for joining me, and I'm not even going to pretend that this time that this is going to be a short episode because there's really a lot of stuff I want to say. It's going to be all about Pokemon. And that's going to include Pokemon GO, some new stuff about Sun and Moon, this Pokemon Pokedex project that I'm working on in collaboration with Amiibo News, Nintendo Wire, my top 6 if I was going to be a Pokemon trainer, my time as a professional gym leader, and the pervasive theory held by some that Pokemon is just an evil cult. So let's dive right in. But before, I'm not going to get into too many tangents on this, but before we do, at the time of this recording, Nintendo just announced 4 new Legend of Zelda amiibo, so I am just super pumped about this. I love Smash Brothers, and the Smash line is the coolest thing about amiibo so far to me, but there's really no surprises there because Nintendo announced very early on in the project that all of the Smash characters were going to get one, and the poses of them is not a surprise because it was widely predictable before any of them even came out that they were just going to be their Smash poses because they were revealed at E3, and since the first 12 obviously were, it was a reasonable assumption that the rest of them would be too. So the only surprises afforded by the Smash line are bad surprises, like which retailer they're exclusive to and how difficult it's going to be to find them. But in the Direct today, they surprised me with an Ocarina of Time link, a Toon Link from Wind Waker with a Toon Zelda in a 2-pack, and also an 8-bit link, and that came out of nowhere for me, so I'm super jazzed about that. I promise I won't talk about it again, but that explains some of why I'm so heightened and amped up. Let's get to some Poke talk, but first, since there's going to be a lot of opinions thrown around here, let's cross our T's and dot our J's.
The views and opinions expressed here are ours alone and do not necessarily reflect those of this channel or its affiliates.
And we reserve the right to alter them at any time if it's convenient or because we feel like it. So, take this.
Now that we got that settled, let me talk a little bit about my personal history with the Pokemon series. If the YouTube demographics are to be believed, I'm a little bit older than most of you. When Pokemon first came out, it was at the same time as Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, which I played a lot of and I was super obsessed with, and I thought it was an amazing game. And also, a lot of my friends were playing Final Fantasy VII. In the last Me Time, I told you that I'm not really that into Fire Emblem because I don't like turn-based RPGs. And I also forewarned you that this time I was probably going to contradict that. Well, Pokemon is Y. It's a game, not Pokemon Y. Pokemon is, you get it. I don't like RPGs for a few reasons. There are some exceptions. Mario RPG sticks out in my mind as one that I really enjoyed. And Pokemon is another one. And mainly because the fighting aspect of it is pretty simple. You really only have 4 moves, particularly the early ones, where before we got into all these like special hidden abilities and junk, which I cannot even think about. It's just too much for my feeble human brain to process. I like to think of Pokemon as an epic game of rock, paper, scissors with just more weapons at your disposal. So if I'm a rock, then I destroy the scissors. If I'm a paper, I wrap up the rock, so you have this triangle of destruction where somebody can always beat somebody, and it becomes a little bit more interesting and a little bit more expansive as you start adding in other types. That's fun, that's really cool. And then you get some anomaly Pokemon who have really interesting type matchups like a Zapdos, for example, where ordinarily a Pokemon that flies would have a really hard time with an electric type. But in his case, he is an electric type, so that helps him out a little bit, and that's fun. That makes him the ultimate of the 3 legendary birds from the original 151, in my opinion. But let's not get into that. My history with the series is, 1998 or 97, I'm not a good numbers person, so forgive me if I'm messing this up. I'm sure a lot of people will correct me if that is the case. I was in high school in 1998, and it was not a cool thing to be playing Pokemon. It's probably something very different now, since there were people who played Pokemon when they were kids who now have kids, and so for their kids, it's just normal. It's a normal thing. But if you happened to be in high school at the time when the game originally came out, it was a baby game. So if you were playing it as a high schooler, you were probably getting made fun of. I'm not gonna lie, for me the interest was not there. My younger brother, however, since I was completely hogging the N64, he would play his Game Boy, and he really got into the Pokemon games. One of the brilliant and unique things about the game at the time was that there were those two different versions, and each version had some exclusivities. So my brother eventually convinced me to start playing it on my Game Boy, and I think one day, a sick day from school. I was probably faking it because I really, really hated school. My parents did not really let me fake it because they were on to me. I was blessed to have a pretty healthy childhood, so I was almost never sick unless it was like Christmas break or something, and then I would be sick because go figure, it happens when you're not. When you wouldn't have school anyway. But somehow I was successfully managed to stay home this day, and I just took the Pokemon game and I played it in bed the entire day, and it kind of sucked me in. It interested me enough for me to continue through the game, and then when Pokemon Gold and Silver came out, I was in college at that point. So then it was super not cool, but I had a really long commute. I lived in the suburbs of Chicago, and I went to school for filmmaking at Columbia College in downtown Chicago on the Loop, so I would commute from my suburban residence to the city, and it took me about an hour by train. So that would be an hour almost every day where I could sit there and play Pokemon Silver, and it got me through the whole game. It was just a simple way for me to try to occupy my time while I had nothing better to do. And for me, Silver, and I guess Gold as well, I happen to have played Silver, was the best Pokemon game. And here's my two reasons why. Number one, and this is a spoiler if you haven't played it, but the game is 20 years old, so deal with it. After you earn your first 8 badges and you beat the game, and you beat the Elite Four, you have to go back to Kanto and earn the original 8 badges. So just when you think the game is over, and just when you think everything's wrapping up, the game is half over. That is awesome. That is so cool. That blew my mind. I was like, there's still more stuff to do. And that's what really disappointed me about the most recent version of Pokemon. I am the type of guy who brings my team from every game into the new game. So my original Charmander that I evolved into a Charizard has followed with me from the very first game. And each game, he becomes harder to use. Because when you first start out, he doesn't want to obey me because he's way beyond my badge allowance. But I usually suffered through it anyway. And he would obey me sometimes, but because he was high enough level, he would still win even if he had several rounds of disobedience. But in the most recent game, I don't know if the percentage of not listening to me is higher or because his level is higher, he wouldn't listen to me. But it wound up being the case with all my Pokemon. None of them would listen to me. So it was a frustrating game for me to play through Pokemon Y. I couldn't use any of the ones that I wanted to use because they were beyond my badge limit. So I had to use Pokemon that I cared less about and hurried through the game in an effort to get to the point where I could use the ones that I wanted to. And then by the time that I got there was nothing left to do. So I was like, wah wah. But that's personal problems. That's personal Pokemon problems. Personal Poke problems. Guys, you see how this is gonna go? And the second reason why Pokemon Gold and Silver is the best is because they basically spoon feed you a shiny red Gyarados. Somewhere in the game you have like this red Gyarados sitting off onto the side in the water, and you can see it. It's not one of the random Pokemon encounters. He's there, and there's a sprite. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh my goodness, I need to go catch that red Gyarados. I didn't know what a shiny Pokemon was at this point. I had never encountered one in the wild. I didn't know that it was a thing, but that red Gyarados, how do you make a Gyarados cooler? You make him red. So I immediately identified him as the ultimate Pokemon. And sure enough, the game does let you catch him, and that is awesome. So he quickly became the leader of my pack and had a very honored place amongst my main 6. At the same time, while I was going to college, I also worked at Toys R Us. And it was a pretty cool time to work there because they were partners with Wizards of the Coast and the Pokemon card game. So what they did was every Saturday, kids from all over the area would come in with their decks, and they would challenge each other, compete in an effort to achieve, or rather to accomplish certain tasks and to challenge the regional gym leader. I had the very good fortune of being the regional gym leader for my particular Toys R Us. So I got to run this weekly event, and it was super cool because these kids were really into it. And we got to pass out awesome exclusive rewards, exclusive cards like a flying Pikachu and Happy Birthday Pikachu. It was the first that Meryl was revealed to be Meryl. At the time, there were a lot of rumors of it being Pika Blue or some kind of water evolution of Pikachu, but it later turned out to not be the case. But it was one of the first ones that we saw from the non-original 151. There's a lot of mystery and speculation about that, so it was a really exciting time for people who are interested in the Pokemon community. And I had a lot of fun doing that. So there's the badges right up there. You can take a look at that, and I still have those. They're a treasured part of my collection. It was a lot of fun. And at the end of this series, once we realized that it was kind of not going to be continued anymore, I made a custom deck of evolutions and even went so far as to create some imagined illusions. See, my custom card making goes all the way back to over a decade when I was making custom Pokemon cards, but the kids could only use them in my league, obviously, because they aren't real cards. But one of the cool things about it was I imagined evolutions that had not yet occurred, so they're brand new. One of them was Levion, which eventually came to pass, and my artistic interpretation of what a grass-type evolution would be was really, really close to what it eventually wound up being. So I was like, wow, oh, that's cool. And then I also made a rock-type Eevee that was Igneon, and then for Igneous Rock, if that doesn't make any sense to you. And then the final one, I made a Steelion, and it was a Steel-type Eevee. And it was just a fun little cool thing that I got to do, and it connected me more to Pokemon because to these kids, I am their Brock. And that's awesome. I was a pretty chill gym leader. Of course, I didn't pull any punches, and I made them have to work, and I wasn't trying to hurt their game. I was just trying to make them better, but I also didn't have an ego about it. So I really wanted them to be able to win. So I was like a good training wheels trainer, somebody who was tough enough for you to cut your teeth, but not so tough that you're obliterated. And it was good. So I really appreciate Toys R Us for giving me that opportunity to be able to do that because it was a cool thing. And it was also my first connection to the card game. I have not kept up with it. It was really just that. I never really collected them myself. I do probably have a couple Happy Birthday Pikachu cards laying around. If I can find them, I'll do a giveaway here. So remind me about that and hold me to it. I'll see what I can do. The next thing I want to talk about a little bit is the Pokemon Visual Pokédex project that you may have caught this week that released on the Nintendo Wire channel. I thought, and this is something that's been coming up for me since I originally watched the anime, which is something I enjoyed when that first came out, although I have subsequently stopped watching it. I might have reconnected with it a little bit because of my kids. But I've always thought that it would be really cool to have a visual Pokedex kind of like Ash had in the show. And now that we all have smartphones at our disposal, I thought, how awesome would it be for me to just be able to put in a Pokemon's name and have all of their vital statistics loading right up for me right there. And one of the things that I personally have with the games now is it's hard for me to keep track of all the type matchups because you have some Pokemon that are not obvious types. I obviously know that fire is going to burn the heck out of a grass and water is going to quench the fire. But sometimes the typing gets a little bit complicated. I can't tell you off the top of my head what fairy types can do, and I forget who is super effective against a ghost and some of the less common type matchups. So I'm frequently referencing online manuals and stuff. So for me, I thought it would be cool to have all this information in one place in a format that is visually dynamic and exciting for me. So I made it for myself. And I thought, maybe some of these people in the Nintendo community who are subscribers to the channel might also appreciate it. So I wanted to make it available to everybody. And I assumed that there would be some people who thought it was pretty cool, and then some people who just couldn't really care less. But what surprised me is the level of vitriol leveled at Nintendo Wire for these videos. I don't want to specifically lampoon any commenters, but there's a general feeling of Nintendo Wire's just out of ideas and they have nothing left to do, and they're using this to just kind of bolster their video count. But that is in no way the case. I don't have a problem with ideas. In fact, if I have any kind of problem, it's I have too many ideas and not enough time to execute all of the ideas that I have. And I just do it from what interests me. It's not like there's a whole lot of financial incentive to make YouTube videos. This is all just something that I do for fun on the side when I can free up some time, because I love it and I love you guys and I want to share this passion that I have for video games with all of you. So if it is something that you enjoy, I'm probably not talking to this group, because if you're watching Me Time, then chances are you guys are one of the dedicated, and so I appreciate that. Thank you. But for the people who really hated it, I don't know exactly where that comes from. Maybe they just got mad that in the beginning it flooded their inbox or their subscription box. So sorry about that. But I feel like it's building up towards a cool resource in the long term. But if you have strong negative feelings about the Pokemon Pokedex project and you really need to get it off your chest, please address it to me. I'm to blame, not Amiibo News. Let me tell you a little bit about how projects that I spearhead appear on this channel. Jason and I have a conversation. I say, hey, Jason, I'm interested in doing a show that's kind of like this. Or in some cases, I already made the show. And I'm like, hey, does this have a place on the channel? And Jason is always very supportive of everything that I do. I've got a separate profile, me, TJ, that is purely for the purposes of communicating with you guys, since I don't really generate new content that appears on that channel a whole lot, so that you can differentiate between comments that are left by Amiibo News, Nintendo Wire, and comments that are left by me. So hit me hard, hit me with your best shot. When it comes to internet criticism, negative attacks are not very effective against me. But that said, it's part of it and it happens, so you got to take the good with the bad. And speaking of the bad, I want to talk a little bit about this crazy thing that happened in the early 2000s, maybe even a little bit earlier, where a lot of religious groups were convinced that the Pokemon card game or the Pokemon video game were actually an insidious plot to corrupt the souls of America's youth and the youth of the global community. I don't have any personal experience with this, but a very close friend of mine, and I got his permission to tell this story. Names will be kept on the down low to protect the identities of the innocent, but it's a wild story. So my friend and his brother and their dad got really, really into collecting the Pokemon cards in the beginning of it. And they actually turned it into a pretty impressive enterprise. They would buy the boxes, or the cards by the box, and take all the ones that they need and put it into their personal collection. And then they would take the remaining packs and sell them for slightly less than kids could buy them from the store to other kids. And then as the kids open up their pack, they receive a holographic that was not the one that they wanted, or maybe they would rather have a different one. And my friend had their binder of copious amounts of extra. So they had this really cool trading thing going on that really was in keeping with the spirit of Pokemon, where it encourages social interaction and trading. And it wound up being really, really cool. And they had amassed two pristine collections of every single card from the first wave. And at some point, his mom was convinced that these Pokemon cards were ultimately evil. And so what that resulted in was, while my friend was away and his dad was not at the house either, his mom started ritualistically burning each card. in an effort to preserve their souls. And his older brother was like, "Mom, please, oh my gosh, what are you doing? Stop, this is horrible." And each card, every single one from this amazing, fantastic collection got burned, reduced to ashes. And so, not surprisingly, when my friend and his dad got home, they were just really demoralized and disappointed by this experience. And later, to his mom's credit, she did admit, "Yeah, I don't know what was going on. That was crazy." But it seems like that was not unique to them. And oddly enough, his current roommate had the very same thing happen in his family. So I'm curious to know from you guys, have you heard about, are you the victim of the Pokemon satanic cult accusations? Were you not allowed to interact with Pokemon in some way because of the fear that it might corrupt you? Or do you know somebody to whom that occurred? That's so wild to me because it's really not in any way what it's about to me. Maybe if Pokemon is the most important thing in your life, you don't have your priorities straight, but I think it's a stretch to say that it's corrupting the minds of America's youth. As far as questionable content in video games is concerned, Pokemon is pretty benign. It's a game where the violence is very minimal, even though it's a game about battling, and the consequences of the battle are pretty minimal. You have characters faint, and there seem to be no long-term consequences to battling. The characters seem to enjoy battling, so nobody's forced into this situation. And it encourages other very cool types of interaction with other people too, like trading and socializing. Which brings me to the most recent incarnation of Pokemon, which is Pokemon GO. I'm going to start off by saying I have not played it. Does it interest me? Yeah, a little bit. One of the things that is the most frustrating possible to me in all video games is unreliability with respect to functionality. If a game is supposed to work in a certain way and it frequently betrays the way that it is supposed to function, it makes me crazy. Nothing makes me want to rage quit more than when the game freezes in the middle of a session, or when you push a button and it is supposed to respond in a certain way and it does not. And when your capacity as a player is reduced or diminished because of fundamental problems with the game itself, not because of your inabilities as a player. That really pulls me out of it immediately and makes me so infuriated. I do not want to be stomping or chucking my smartphone device, and I can see myself really getting into that. So when it was flooded with users at the very beginning who were super excited about it, some of them are, of course, diehard Pokemon players, and some of them are just casuals who want to see what it's all about. I'd put myself somewhere in the middle, but I didn't want to be any part of that mess. So I've sat back and not gotten into it yet, but I do take tons of walks with my kids every day, and I could see how that would be a cool thing to experience with them. My daughter's at the point now where she's really starting to ask me about Pokemon all the time, which is another one of the main reasons why I wanted to do this Pokemon Visual Pokédex, because every time she shows me one of these, she's like, "Daddy, what Pokemon this?" And I love being able to say, "Oh, well, that's Butterfree." And it's fun to me. So to be able to walk and find a Butterfree, I think that's something that she would really enjoy. And so because I could share that experience with my kids, it has some incentive. And I could see that easily getting its hooks into me and making me want to commit more to that. My interest in Pokemon is not collecting. The fact that there's 151 in the first game immediately gave me no delusion that I was going to ever be able to collect them all. Congratulations to those of you out there who did somehow manage to complete that Pokedex. Yeah, that's way too much work for me. That's way too hard. I'll never be able to do that. I don't got that kind of time. So I just kind of cherry pick my favorites and then put them into the game. So what interests me about Pokemon, if not the collecting aspect, is the battling aspect. Man, I just want to go up to a trainer and be like, "Yeah, check out my Charizard. Boom, 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 boom. Fire burst, baby. Eat it." So when battling gets incorporated in a proper sense, not this gym takeover situation that we're dealing with right now, then maybe it will pull me in a little bit more. And I want to be able to level up my Pokemon through battle experience, and not because I'm feeding them candy. Candy's cool and all, but it's not my speed. I don't know if there are any long-term plans to include battling, but it does seem like the natural evolution of the series. That would pull me in. So back to the Pokemon Visual Pokedex, a lot of people have asked if I intend to make all 700 plus some odd Pokemon, but the answer is probably not. I see myself doing the original 151 as a way to build up excitement and try to usher in the newest Pokemon game, Sun and Moon, and then once that does come out, I think it would be a lot of fun to acquaint myself with each of the new Pokemon by starting with the Alola Pokemon. So once the 151 is released, which I imagine I'll try to have finished by November 18th, which if memory serves is when Sun and Moon release, and then I'll probably start at the very beginning of the Alola Pokedex, and we'll go through however many are included in that game. And at that point, if people aren't too annoyed and frustrated with the series, we'll see if it merits pursuing it in any way beyond that. But another thing that I've been asked about is, will it include Mega Forms or Alola Forms? And the answer is yes. So I'll have a separate playlist that shows the Mega Forms, and you'll be able to hot link to that through annotations or cards from the video of the original Pokemon that has the alternate evolution form or the Mega Evolution form. When they first introduced the starters for Pokemon Sun and Moon, I have to say it is the first time where I didn't immediately know exactly which one I was going to go for. I might have a natural bent towards the fire type, although going back through each of the games, I didn't really pick the fire type all the time. Of course, Charmander was my first one. He's by far the best of the first ones in the game. And so when we got to Gold and Silver, I went with Cyndaquil? Is that his name? I don't really even know. I'm surprised Avon was able to pull that out. That might be one of his later evolution forms, I don't remember. But I picked him just because I figured he would get me far enough till I could transfer my Charizard in. And he did. But at some point you get this little fire chicken, and I was like, no, I'm not about this fire chicken. So I went with somebody else. And I was like, Fire Pig? No Fire Pig. I'll go with Grass Dragon. Yeah, that's cool. So I look at these Sun and Moon Pokemon and I think, all right, well, I can be Apple with a bite taken out of it, Owl. No. I can be Snooty Fire Cat. No. Or I can be Puppy Water Clown Dog. Ugh. So for me, here's what's going to go down. I'm going to pick that Water Puppy Clown Dog, but I'm not going to be happy about it. I'm going to play him only insofar as I need to be able to get to something much cooler. And then I will swap out with my original team that's been following me forever, and I hope that I have something to do with them because they're all like in their 90s or something. Some of them might even be 100, so they're really tough to use. And I'm going to finish out this episode talking about who my top 6 are for my ultimate Pokemon team. And then I want to invite you to let me know who you would use as the ultimate team if you were the Pokemon Grand Champion. So I would be the Grand Champion Dragon-type trainer, kind of like Lance. But oddly enough, the first 3 Pokemon in my Dragon collection are not Dragon types in the strict sense of the type. But you can see why I'd include them. The first one would be Charizard. Yes, the original starter from the original game. He's not a Dragon type unless you do, I think it's the X evolution and then, or the X Mega evolution, and then he has Dragon as a secondary type. But he pretty much has the appearance of a traditional Western European interpretation of a dragon. And he looks awesome, he's tough, he flies around, and he breathes fire. If that doesn't scream dragon, I don't know what does. So he's one of my main guys. My second in command, who I actually put in the first spot, is my Red Gyarados. Red Gyarados is amazing, not only because he's red, but also because as a water flying type, he has access to a pretty wide variety of different type moves. So I give him Fire Blast, which is awesome, because then I've got this water type Pokemon with a Fire Blast. I give him some super cool water type move because they force HMs down my throat. It's usually Surf, which is not an an unuseful move for a Gyarados. Gyarados could just like, wha-bam, drown you out with that Surf. And he also can use Thunder Shock. So I give him this super cool electric type move, which is the bane of his existence. If you hit this flying water type with an electric move, you take him out. But that's my one weakness. If I put him in my first spot, then almost no matter who your first Pokemon is, I've got something for you. You want a little bit of fire? I got you. You want a little bit of water? I'll soak you out. You want a little bit of lightning? Zzz, I will zap you. That red Gyarados is amazing. The third Pokemon is one that I became attached to that I didn't expect to like, and that was the evolved form of Snivy, Serperior. Serperior is super cool. He's not or she, mine's a girl. She's not a dragon type, but she does have this very sleek serpentine body, and you know that she means business. She can grass type you for sure and wreck you with her ultimate grass type arsenal. I'll try to throw a few poison type moves in there to mix it up and mess you up. She likes to play the long game with some insidious techniques that will just take you down notch by notch. But no matter what Pokemon I swap out with, you're still gonna feel the effects of my Superior. Now these three are solid. They're unrotatable. They never leave my main six. The next three, I have been known to play around a little bit with them, but I'll lay down who's in my current top six. Giratina, or Giratina, I don't know how to say that, but what I like about this Pokemon is it's a ghost dragon type, and that's a pretty unique type. I don't know if there's even another one like that. I like to use the form that is less dinosaur and more serpentine because it looks super cool. And I like those ghost type moves. They're pretty awesome. My fifth spot goes to Tyrantrum. It's a rock dragon type, and it's super cool because none of the other Pokemon really have that move combination, and a lot of my Pokemon are weak to electric moves. So I like to have this guy who has a higher resistance to electric and also can really wreak havoc on some flying types. And my final Pokemon, which I'll admit to switching out quite a bit, is currently held by Hydreigon. This Pokemon has 3 heads. It looks super awesome in the totally fierce department. It gets pretty high marks. And the other cool aspect to this dragon type is it's also a dark type. And if you know anything about me, you know I do have a little bit of a dark side over there. And so that aspect of my personality appreciates having something to cast some shade on those other Pokemon trainers. So that rounds out my top 6. If you were to encounter me as the Pokemon League champion, that's what you'd be facing down. So let me know what your ultimate Pokemon team is and what type of trainer you'd be. And that's all I've got for this episode of Me Time. As always, I really appreciate you spending your time with me, and I hope to see you again next time. Thanks for playing. Oh, one last thing. Even though I'm not playing Pokemon Go yet, when I do finally get into the game, there's only one team that matters. That's right. Of course I'm talking about Team Valor, baby. I'm coming for you.